Have you ever scrolled past a headline about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and just thought, why is this still a thing? Why can't they just stop? Subscribe for more stories that linger in your mind. It feels like the world's longest, most complicated group project that nobody can agree on. You've got two groups of people living in a piece of land smaller than New Jersey, who have been locked in a bitter struggle for over a century. So, what's the deal? Why, after countless peace talks, treaties, and handshakes on the White House lawn, is peace still so ridiculously out of reach? Alright, let's break this down. To understand why peace is so elusive, you have to realize this isn't just one single argument. It's a messy, multi-layered cake of historical grievances, religious significance, and political failures. Think of it as four massive, unsolved problems that are all tangled together. First up, the big one: land and borders. This is the classic "who gets what" argument. After the first major war in 1948, which erupted when Israel was created, the territory was divided. Israel controlled some of it, while Jordan took the West Bank and East Jerusalem, and Egypt took the Gaza Strip. But then came the Six-Day War in 1967, a game-changing moment where Israel captured the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem. Since then, these areas have been under Israeli occupation. The international community, for the most part, agrees that a solution should look something like the two-state solution. This means creating an independent state of Palestine in the West Bank and Gaza, roughly along the borders that existed before the 1967 war. Sounds simple enough, right? Wrong. The problem is what has happened on that land since 1967: Israeli settlements. Successive Israeli governments have built communities for their citizens inside the occupied West Bank and East Jerusalem. Today, over 700,000 Israeli settlers live in these territories. From an international law perspective, these settlements are considered illegal because the Fourth Geneva Convention prohibits an occupying power from transferring its own population into the territory it occupies. But for many Israelis, especially religious and nationalist groups, they see this as reclaiming their biblical homeland. So, you can see the issue. These settlements aren't just a few houses, they are entire towns and cities with their own roads and infrastructure. Often built on private Palestinian land, they effectively carve up the West Bank into a series of disconnected Palestinian islands, making the idea of a viable, contiguous Palestinian state look like Swiss cheese. For Palestinians, it's like trying to build a house while someone is actively building their own house in your living room. For Israel, security is a major concern. They argue these pre-1967 borders are indefensible. This creates a fundamental deadlock. How do you draw a border when one side has already moved in and built hundreds of thousands of homes across the proposed line? Next, let's talk about the world's most contested piece of real estate, Jerusalem. This city is not just a capital, it's the epicenter of holiness for three major world religions. For Jews, it's the site of the Western Wall, the last remnant of their ancient temple. For Christians, it's where Jesus was crucified and resurrected. For Muslims, it's home to the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the third holiest site in Islam. Both Israelis and Palestinians claim Jerusalem as their capital. Israel declared the unified city its capital after capturing East Jerusalem in 1967. But the international community has largely rejected this, viewing East Jerusalem as occupied territory and the future capital of a Palestinian state. The city is intensely divided. West Jerusalem is predominantly Jewish Israeli, while East Jerusalem is majority Palestinian Arab, though with a large and growing Israeli settler population. The core of the problem is that you can't exactly split holy sites with a hacksaw. The final status of Jerusalem has been deemed so explosive that in past peace talks, like the Oslo Accords, negotiators basically said, you know what, let's deal with this one later. But later never came. Control over Jerusalem is about more than just governance, it's about national identity, religious legitimacy, and historical narrative. For both sides, giving up their claim to the entire city feels like a surrender of their very soul. Third, we have the deeply emotional and tragic issue of Palestinian refugees. This story begins in 1948, during the war that led to Israel's creation, in what Palestinians call the Nakba, or catastrophe. More than 700,000 Palestinians fled or were expelled from their homes in the territory that became Israel. They and their descendants now number nearly 6 million, registered with the UN and scattered across refugee camps in the West Bank, Gaza, Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon. For Palestinians, the right of return is a core demand. They insist that, based on international law like UN Resolution 194, refugees should be allowed to return to their original homes and lands. But for Israel, this is an existential threat. The return of millions of Palestinians would drastically alter the country's demography, potentially ending its identity as a Jewish-majority state. It's a demographic equation that Israel views as a red line. So, while Palestinians see it as a matter of justice and a fundamental human right, Israel sees it as a form of national suicide. Peace talks have explored solutions like compensation or resettlement in a future Palestinian state. But the fundamental clash between the right to return and the right to a Jewish state remains one of the most painful and unresolved parts of the conflict. Finally, there's the breakdown of the peace process itself, which is a story of failed leadership, deep-seated mistrust, and extremism. The most famous attempt at peace was the Oslo Accords in the 1990s. It was a huge moment, with famous handshakes and Nobel Peace Prizes. The Accords set up the Palestinian Authority to give Palestinians limited self-rule in parts of the West Bank and Gaza, with the idea that all the big issues, borders, Jerusalem, refugees, settlements, would be figured out within 5 years. Spoiler alert, they weren't. Why did it fail? Both sides blame each other. Palestinians point to Israel's continuous expansion of settlements, which made them feel the peace process was a sham, just a cover for Israel to grab more land. Israelis point to waves of suicide bombings and attacks by Palestinian militant groups like Hamas, which made them feel the Palestinians weren't committed to peace and couldn't be trusted with their security. The assassination of Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin in 1995 by a right-wing Israeli extremist was a devastating blow to the process. Trust evaporated. The 2000 Camp David summit, another major attempt, ended in failure and was quickly followed by the violent Second Intifada, a Palestinian uprising. Since then, the situation has become more polarized. The Palestinian leadership is split between the Fatah-led Palestinian Authority in the West Bank and Hamas, an Islamist group that controls Gaza and doesn't recognize Israel's right to exist. Israeli politics have shifted further to the right, with leaders often prioritizing the status quo or settlement expansion over a two-state solution. This leaves a massive leadership vacuum. You can't sign a peace deal if you don't have a reliable partner on the other side, or if your own people won't support it. Decades of failed negotiations have left both sides cynical, exhausted, and deeply skeptical that peace is even possible. So, why can't Israel and Palestine find peace? Because it's a perfect storm. It's a fight over land where every square inch is sacred, borders that are riddled with settlements, a city holy to billions, and a refugee crisis that spans generations. Add in a total collapse of trust and a crisis of leadership, and you get a conflict that seems perpetually stuck. It's not that peace is impossible, but it would require a level of courage, compromise, and political will that has been tragically missing for a very long time. It's a heartbreaking puzzle where every piece is soaked in history. And until you can solve all four of these core issues at once, a lasting solution will likely remain just out of reach. So yeah, it's complicated. Maybe just hit that subscribe button instead. It's way easier. If you felt this, leave a like. It helps the story reach more souls.